So, welcome back to another dive of insights from the Color Dojo, a visual arts podcast. So, many things can be thought of as a canvas, and part of the process is just experimenting with all the different types of canvases that can be explored. So right here, what's happening is I'm working on some denim jackets, specifically painting on clothing. Clothing have different seams in different places, and it's also like a wearable garment. So whatever you paint on there, it's not the same as just a canvas that's going to go on the wall. In this case, I really like this denim jacket, and when I do paint on garments, I prefer garments that kind of act as a big canvas. So I really like this big flat panel, and this is very similar to if I was just working on a canvas. The only difference would be that the shape of it is a jacket. So what I did here is I built out a wooden frame that has a piece of wood on the surface, so it's like hard backed, where I can push on this and paint. And so it's hard back, so I can push on it and push the paint into the fabric, and it's pulled around that structure, so it's kind of like working on a stretch canvas, but the piece is actually a jacket. So the thickness of that paint is something that I like, as well as like this brush that I'm using. This brush has flexible, but also it's a stiff and springy like bristles to it. So it's really good to like push thicker paint into that fabric. Over the years, having explored just painting on different types of garments, and I'm really moving into a season now where I've been working on a series of these jackets, and I've been working on more wearable art, with the intention behind that just being like somebody having something that they can wear that like is completely one of one, that is thought about just like a piece of art. So it's been a lot of just exploring the different tools and paints and garments that I like. So this is down in the workshop, and I was talking about building out those wooden frames to work on the jackets earlier, and this is me doing that. So in my new workspace, so let's talk about that for a little bit, just like studio spaces. Um, Over the last decade, I've probably worked in, let me think, I don't know, I've probably had 8 different studio spaces, I think, all of which I ended up moving on from because I grew out of. And the thing about that I've learned in upgrading a studio space is it's important to have clarity as to why exactly you need a different type of space, as opposed to just like reorganizing or rethinking the current space that you have. So the volume of work that I have always produced, from the time I started, I've always worked on more than one piece at a time, and have just made a large amount of work. It's always been a situation about just having square footage to just move it all around, to store it all, but to also explore what it's like to jump around and work on so many different pieces at a time. So so my painting studio is above this shop, which is the workshop where I can build all the frames and do all that. And before this, I worked out of I don't know, I think it was probably a 1,500, no, I think it was 1,200 square foot, like loft that I also lived in. So my workspace was probably about the size of, like, from the end of that table to that wall that you see in front of me to the other wall to the left. That was about the size of my workspace. So like, and I churned a crazy amount of work out of that space, and it just got to the point where I realized that not moving forward and finding, the adequate type of studio for the process that I'm exploring, what it really resulted in wasn't so much of me being frustrated with, like, not being able to make work, because I was still making work, but I just realized that the quality and the quality of how I could explore was being stifled, and it would get to the point where it would just not happen at all, in a way. So for 2 years, and I guess this is like what we're talking about now, is just like reinvestment into your process. And I guess one thing to just talk about, and I don't want to shy away from like talking number specifics, because I think that's important for that just to be communicated from just a practicality standpoint, because I think so much of the perception of a working artist or a successful artist is like this thing that's like shrouded in some type of like mystery. Like, people who are starting out just have no idea what that even looks like or what that even means. So to contextualize that a little bit, it was like, there's 2 things. The first thing is it's work. yeah, for me, it's totally a passion, but I would not, I would, uh, be kind of disrespecting the practice to also not describe it as work. I think like work is a really beautiful thing, and a hobby or a or something like that. It's like when you don't feel like doing it, you don't show up. You do it when you feel like doing it. That's kind of like the difference. So this for me, it's work because I show up for it because that's what's required. And that can look different for every artist. I think early on, it's really important to create healthy habits of actually being in the process of creating, of exploring the tools and materials, because that's how you learn. And that's how you get to the point where it doesn't seem like it's hard work. It just requires you showing up and participating from the right psyche. So I spent 2 years just saving every dollar I could, as I just worked as much as I possibly could to be available to make a reinvestment into the right workspace as it showed up. And so there's the work that goes into just making all the art, selling all the art, saving up, just doing that over and over and over again. And then there's the work of actually letting go of that sense of like security and just actually reinvesting and betting on yourself again. Yeah, it was like this really crazy experience for me to just hunker down for, I think it was like 2.5 years. And, I worked every day for, at minimum, 12 to 14 hours a day. And that's like just at minimum. And that's like in the studio producing. There's some days where it was more, and really what it was like this exercise of just pushing myself to really understand what it felt like to simplify life down to nothing more than just the creative practice itself, and give myself the availability to just do that. So that also required me to like learn new things, to learn like the e-commerce side of like my website. It was also all that. So it was making art, and then it was also all that admin work. And with the awareness that at some point, like that's not that part. It takes time that could be used for me, like actually producing the work. So I have this mantra on my studio wall right now that says the purpose of scale is quality, not quantity. And so like with the intention of it all to just like say, all right, I'm going to go down this path and upgrade my workspace, give myself what I need. It was to not necessarily make more art or make more money. It was to make a better. It was to have a better quality in the exploration of the process, um, which that's absolutely happened, and it's been awesome. So um, yeah, I reinvested over that 2 years that I saved up. I think it was like maybe like 80% of what all that was, and it was crazy because um, I'd never I saved just I, I didn't spend any money on anything other than art supplies, and in many ways, I mean, I'm going into a phase where I'm getting back to that, where I'm just gonna get back to that. At this point, I don't even really need to spend that much on art supplies, to be real. There's a lot of them that I can use in the studio, and me getting away from my preference of maybe what I like to use will be a good thing. Um, so yeah, I reinvested, purchased a giant warehouse that I've been renovating. Um, these walls that you see behind me, they're like these big barn door track wall systems, so I can store a bunch of artwork all out at once. Um, yeah, and it's been great. So, so what I'm working on now is another jacket. Sometimes I will just freehand the design on there. Other times, like this, the the line I did is it's a very symmetrical design, so it's much easier just to freehand because the proportions are mirrored, and the composition of it, it it's just symmetrical. So for this, I use like a chalk outline to sketch out the design, um, and then I'm jumping in from that. This brush, this is like this nice. So, some of my favorite brushes are like these really cheap, just really cheap, affordable, like I think they call them like chip brush bristles. Like they're like, I think it's like some type of like they're not made out of, they're not synthetic. It's not like an animal hair. It's like I think it's like a corn or some type of like hard like grass or something. And yeah, I really like these brushes. One, because they're really affordable and you can get a whole lot of them. And having a bunch of them, it's not so you can be wasteful and just throw them away. It's so, if I wanted to have one of these brushes in every color, so like one of these jars of every color with its own brush, that becomes its own workflow to be able to do that, as opposed to having one nice brush that you like using that you're always wiping off. Like I try to find those like moments, I don't know, it's like lag time where like it's like the color wheel is spinning in the process, and what those moments when they happen create is it creates space to think about things that aren't what you're doing, and then your mind wanders off. So much of like the creative practice, especially having a space that's like so many tools and materials around, it's really a process of, yes, you are becoming more skilled with the tools and materials you're using, but it's also just as much like just like psychologically like disciplining like where your attention goes at all times. And there's certain like principles to just organizing a space that are beneficial to that type of exploration. And there's certain habits that are really good. So I'll talk about some of those like habits. One of those habits is finding the ways that you can eliminate or at least be aware of intentionally be aware when you are creating movement that is either unnecessary or like redundant, and replacing that with either like an optimized way of looking at the order of operations you're using, or creating a practice of just being intentional about resting within the process itself. So there's times where it's just like I know I have to sweep the floor, and that is a barrier for me to maybe put a piece of canvas on the floor and do a certain type of technique. And I could try to just rush and get the floor swept, because like it's really like there's this nuanced skill as an artist to be able to work with a high intensity and urgency, but not frantically. Because like the example of like the sweeping the floor, you know, all of a sudden you're like thinking like, oh, I want to sweep the floor because I want to get to this other thing. And then you start sweeping the floor, and as you're sweeping the floor, you're not actually even sweeping the floor. You're thinking about this thing that you're working on, but the floor getting swept and it getting swept the absolute correct way that you need it, all the little pieces of debris off so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the canvas, so you can use big scraping tools and not have it grab what's underneath, and so the tools work right. You're not even there doing that, and then like none of it works. So when I talk about the times of rest, I think like there's this it's easy to affiliate rest with lack of focus and intensity of work with effort, and it's not necessarily that way all the time. So like noticing these little things and being able to build the process in a way that you become aware of these elements over the course of however many hours, you know, that I'm working, makes it where the work session is really effective, as opposed to me just like not being focused, showing up thinking that, because I mean the reality of it is, I said this earlier, I was like, yeah, you know, showing up. Then I was like showing up with the right psyche, because just showing up it's not enough. You could just show up and just stuff could happen, and you don't grow, you don't learn. It's not enough. So I think what this journey really informs on is the necessariness of becoming well acquainted with the way that you think. And learning not to like fight with that or dislike it, but just notice it as just a practicality of something that is nothing more than another tool and material that like you're using to learn and create with. So this jacket's coming together as I went on that rabbit hole dive. Things were happening. And like you're seeing right now, you're seeing like these layering of different tools with different colors, right? I was using this same type of brush to put on the white. Now I'm using it for the black, like that bigger, well, I guess it's not a big round brush, that smaller round brush that I was using on the Cardinal. I also used on this. So right now a lion's getting painted. Yes, a Cardinal got painted, but what those are is you could think of those in a way as the medium in which the tools are being explored. From the standpoint of me, yes, I'm painting on a jacket. You could say the jacket is like a canvas. You could also say that the canvas is my intention going into this work session, saying, all right, these are the brushes that I'm going to explore in this work session. So compartmentalizing things like that, it makes it really easy to remove the feeling that you have to like come up with some genius thing every time that you work, or you have to complete some masterpiece. I have found that it is much less it's just much more fun, and you can be much more spontaneous looking at from the standpoint of like the ingredient list that's going to exist within the session, and you giving yourself complete freedom to explore what those are within maybe the looser structure of like an abstract painting. Because the thing about it is, like, yes, I'm painting this part of this lion, but I'm not. I mean, you could look at this as an abstract painting and think of it as an abstract painting as well as you're working, when it becomes only about, I'm exploring this workflow. I'm exploring this brush, this type of paint, and this thickness on this material with this type of energy. Like, these are the colors that exist around it. It's abstract, totally, but also there's subject matter to it. So, So from the other standpoint of looking at it, going in and being like, oh man, like I'm painting a lion. Well, then that informs like how you think you need to use the tool completely, and there's just less to discover. So you're going to hear many of the same phrases for me when I talk about the creative process. One is going to be exploration. The main one's going to be that it's all geared towards exploration and discovery, and then understanding what's happening and the ability to become skillful with that. So right now I'm working wet on wet. That means that the green paint is also wet as I'm mixing it into this gold. So what that allows for is I'm picking up like these thick globs of gold, and you'll see how I'm kind of rolling the brush. And in the last podcast, I was talking about how you hold the brush kind of like a wand with the palm of your hand. You see how I'm doing that now. So that allows me to really use my fingers to just, like, if you think about like you're spinning a top, it allows you to use the brush the same way. So what that does is, as I'm like cutting through some of this green and I'm turning the brush, it gives a nice like color mixing, but also like a textured line from thick to thin, from gold to green. That is very easy to do. Just almost just like spinning the brush as you move it through those two types of paints.